My wife cheated on me with a guy from the gym. I tracked her to his apartment, and when I confronted her, she said it wasn't serious, but then she left me. I've been married to Amanda for 8 years. We met back in college, both working late shifts at a local bar to cover tuition and bills. Those nights were rough, but it brought us closer. We bonded over shared dreams of building something together. And when we finally got out of school, life seemed like it was heading in the right direction. Our relationship, at least from my perspective, had always been strong. We shared everything: our plans, our fears, our frustrations. Amanda was my best friend, and I thought I was hers. We even talked about starting a family, but she wanted to wait until we were more financially stable, which I totally respected. I didn't mind the wait. We had time. But something shifted a few months ago. I can't put my finger on the exact moment, but it was like there was this subtle change in the air between us. Amanda started acting different. It was small things at first, so small that I brushed them off. She would always be on her phone, nothing new, right? But this time, she started turning her screen away whenever I walked by. I caught her smiling at texts, something she used to do with me when we were dating. That little smile when you're flirting with someone, you know, the one. She'd leave the room to take calls, saying it was a work thing or her mom, but something felt off. When I'd ask her about it, she'd get defensive, which wasn't like her. Amanda had always been a pretty private person, so at first I thought maybe it was just stress from work or something. She started going to the gym more, which I thought was great. She'd always been into fitness, but now it was like she had this renewed focus. But it also meant more late nights, longer gym sessions, and a sudden need to catch up with friends I'd never heard of before. I asked her one night if everything was okay. I'll never forget the way she looked at me, like I was being paranoid. "It's just work stress," she said, her tone sharp. "You're overthinking it," and I believed her. I didn't want to be the controlling husband who questions every little thing. I trusted her, and that's where I made my first mistake. Still, there was this nagging feeling that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the secrecy or the phone, it was her whole attitude. She was distant, like she wasn't really there when we were together. And then there was the sex, or lack thereof. We used to have a great physical relationship, but now she seemed to always have an excuse. She was tired, stressed, had a long day. At first, I didn't press it, thinking it was just a phase. But the more it happened, the more I started to wonder if there was something else going on. One night, when she went to bed early, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter, I noticed it light up. Now, I'm not the type to go through someone's phone. That's not me. But when it lit up again and again, I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from someone named L. The preview read, "I can't stop thinking about you." My heart sank. My mind raced. I knew I shouldn't have, but I picked up her phone, trying to rationalize what I'd just seen. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was one of those dumb spam messages. But the tone, the timing, it didn't sit right with me. Amanda had been at the gym earlier that night, and she hadn't seemed interested in much conversation when she got back. I decided to leave it alone, but that message haunted me. Who is Elle? And why couldn't they stop thinking about my wife? I didn't confront her right away. Something stopped me, maybe the fear of what I'd find out. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started paying more attention. I watched her more closely, took mental notes of the late nights, the longer gym sessions, the times she'd come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I even started looking through her social media. There was nothing obvious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. After another week of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage, I broke my own rules. I installed a tracking app on her phone when she left it at home one morning. I didn't feel good about it. In fact, I felt like a complete jerk. But I had to know. I had to be sure. That night, while Amanda was out at the gym, I watched her location on the app. My heart pounded as I saw her stop at a random address across town. It wasn't a restaurant, it wasn't a gym, it was a small apartment building. A place she'd never mentioned before. That was the moment my world started to crumble. I stared at the app on my phone, my hands shaking. I kept watching as her location stayed at that apartment for almost 2 hours. At first, I tried to convince myself that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she was meeting a friend, maybe it was some kind of gym-related event, but deep down I knew this wasn't innocent. When she got home that night, she was her usual distant self. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong and headed straight to the shower. Normally, I'd be relieved she was back, but this time, all I could feel was dread. I wanted to ask her right then and there where she had been, but I held back. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. The next few days were excruciating. Every time Amanda left the house, I found myself glued to that tracking app. And every time the same thing happened. She'd go to that same apartment building, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for the entire evening. I felt sick to my stomach, torn between confronting her and waiting until I had something concrete to call her out on. One night, when she left again, I made the decision. I drove across town and parked a block away from that apartment building. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. The idea of just walking in there, catching her in the act, made me want to throw up. But I needed to see for myself. After waiting in the car for what felt like an eternity, I saw her, Amanda, walking out of the building with a man. He was tall, well-built, and definitely not a gym buddy. They didn't notice me as they walked toward a car parked nearby. I watched as they laughed, talking closely, too closely for comfort. My blood boiled as I saw him put his arm around her waist and pull her in for a kiss. That was it. Everything inside me shattered. There was no mistaking what was happening anymore. This wasn't just a one-time thing or a misunderstanding. My wife was having an affair, and she didn't even seem to care if she got caught. I couldn't take it anymore. I left before they could see me, driving aimlessly around the city, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Part of me wanted to storm into that apartment, to confront both of them right then and there. But another part of me just felt numb, like all the life had been sucked out of me. By the time I got home, Amanda was already back. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. How could she sit there so calmly, like everything was fine? How could she look me in the eye every day, knowing what she was doing behind my back? Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice as steady as I could manage. She barely looked up from her phone. "I told you, I went to the gym." I felt my hands clench into fists. "You didn't go to the gym, Amanda." She froze for a second, but quickly composed herself, her face blank. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "I know you've been going to that apartment across town. I've seen you. I've watched you leave that building with a man. So don't lie to me." Her eyes widened for a split second, but then she shifted into something colder, more calculated. "What were you doing following me?" "That's really creepy, you know." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Creepy? Amanda, I'm not the one sneaking around and lying. I'm not the one cheating." She let out a laugh, but it was empty, hollow. "Cheating? That's what you think this is." She shook her head, as if I was the one who had lost my mind. "Look, it's not what you think. I needed some space, that's all. The guy you saw, his name's Liam. We talk sometimes. It's nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. "I watched you kiss him, Amanda. You don't just talk with someone you're kissing." She sighed, like I was some annoying child who just didn't understand. "Look, things have been tense between us for a while now. I needed someone to talk to, someone to help me get away from all the stress. It's not like I'm sleeping with him." Her words felt like another punch to the gut. There was no apology, no remorse, not even a hint of guilt in her voice. She didn't deny the emotional connection, but somehow, the fact that she wasn't technically sleeping with him was supposed to make everything better? It's not about that, I finally said, my voice cracking. It's about the lying, the sneaking around. You've been shutting me out for months, Amanda. I don't even know who you are anymore. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her expression icy. Maybe that's the problem. You never bothered to really know me. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me standing there in silence. After she left the room, I stood there for what felt like hours. My mind was spinning. How did we get here? How could she be so cold, so indifferent? I'd been standing in front of her, broken, and all she had to offer was some half-hearted excuse about needing space. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was how little she seemed to care. I felt like I'd been tossed aside, like I didn't matter anymore. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I married, was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Amanda move around in the house as if nothing had happened. I heard her in the kitchen, opening cabinets, probably grabbing a snack or something. It was surreal. The thought of her slipping into bed beside me, pretending like everything was fine, made me sick. The next morning, things weren't any better. Amanda acted as if nothing had happened. She moved around the house, making coffee, getting ready for work, and barely said a word to me. It was like we had this silent agreement to pretend that last night's conversation never took place. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just act like everything was normal. I tried to talk to her again that evening. I had spent the whole day stewing over it, going through every possible scenario in my head, trying to make sense of what she had said the night before. Maybe there was some way to fix things, some way to salvage what was left of our relationship. But when I approached her, it was like hitting a brick wall. "Can we talk about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I felt anything but calm. She didn't even look up from her phone. "What's there to talk about?" My frustration boiled over. "Are you serious? What do you mean, what's there to talk about? You've been lying to me, sneaking around with another guy, and you're acting like none of this matters?" She sighed dramatically, finally putting her phone down. "I already told you it's not what you think. You're overreacting. You always do this." Overreacting? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I caught you sneaking around behind my back. You lied to me over and over again. And now you're telling me I'm the one overreacting." She rolled her eyes like I was being unreasonable. "You act like I cheated on you or something. It was just a few conversations, okay? You don't own me, Jake." That was the moment I realized I was talking to a stranger. This wasn't Amanda anymore. Or maybe it never was. Maybe I had been blind to who she really was all along. But standing there in that moment, hearing her dismiss everything we'd been through, I realized I was fighting for something that no longer existed. She didn't care. She wasn't sorry. She didn't even try to explain. She was done. And I felt like the biggest fool in the world for ever thinking otherwise. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Amanda and I didn't talk much, and when we did, it was cold and distant. She stopped coming home at her usual times, and I started sleeping on the couch. The bed felt too empty, too painful, and every night I'd lie there wondering where she was, who she was with. My mind wouldn't let me rest. I became obsessed with the details. Every time she left the house, I tracked her. I watched as she continued going to that apartment. Each time she left, I'd hope irrationally that maybe this time she'd come clean. Maybe she'd confess that it was more than just talking, but she never did. Instead, she'd come home and act like everything was normal, like nothing had changed between us, except everything had. One night, when I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to confront her again. I needed to hear the truth, even if it destroyed me. When she walked through the door late that night, I was waiting for her. We need to talk, I said, standing in the kitchen as she set down her keys. She didn't respond at first, just glanced at me with that same indifferent look, like she couldn't be bothered. What now? She finally said, her tone sharp. I want the truth, Amanda. The real truth. Who is Liam, and what's going on between you two? She sighed, rubbing her temples like she had a headache. I already told you. We're just friends. You're seriously blowing this out of proportion, Jake. Stop lying to me, I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. I've seen you with him. I've watched you leave that apartment with him, Amanda. I've seen the way you act around him. Friends don't sneak around like that. Friends don't kiss each other. She looked at me, her expression hardening. Okay, fine, she said coldly, crossing her arms. You want the truth? I've been seeing Liam for a while, but it's not what you think. We haven't slept together. Not yet. Anyway, her words hit me like a truck. Not yet. That's what she said, like it was only a matter of time before it happened. Why was all I could manage to say. Why are you doing this? She shrugged, completely unfazed. Because I needed something different. Because I'm tired of you. Tired of us. You're so boring, Jake. All you care about is work and routine. Liam actually makes me feel alive. I don't know why you're so surprised. You must have known things weren't great between us. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. She said it so casually, like our marriage was just some inconvenience she was ready to toss aside. I thought about all the years we spent together, all the memories we shared, and realized that none of it mattered to her. Not anymore. I stood there, feeling like someone had knocked the wind out of me. Amanda's words echoed in my head. I'm tired of you. Tired of us. All I could think was, how did we get here? How did everything we built together turn into this? I couldn't believe how cold she sounded, how easily she dismissed everything we had. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to process it all. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to say something. But what could I say? How do you respond when the person you love tells you that they're tired of you? I didn't realize I was such a burden to you, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the anger and sadness building inside me, threatening to boil over. She rolled her eyes. Don't play the victim, Jake. It's not like that. I just need more than what you're giving me. You've been so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't even notice I was unhappy. I didn't even recognize her anymore. This wasn't the Amanda I fell in love with. The woman standing in front of me was someone else entirely. Someone who didn't care about the pain she was causing. Someone who was more interested in chasing some cheap thrill than working on our marriage. And Liam, I asked, my voice shaking, he's what you need. She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. Maybe. I don't know. It's just different with him. Different. That's what she kept saying. Like our life together wasn't enough for her anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, make her realize what she was throwing away. But at the same time, I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She had already made up her mind. How long has this been going on? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. She sighed, as if I was exhausting her with my questions. A few months. We started talking and it just happened. But like I said, we haven't done anything. Not yet. I could tell she was telling the truth about that part. Amanda wasn't the type to lie outright. She preferred twisting the truth until it barely resembled reality. But the fact that she wanted to sleep with him, that was enough. It didn't matter if she hadn't crossed that line yet. The intent was there. She had already checked out of our marriage long before I caught on. I felt my chest tighten as the reality of it all settled in. This wasn't something we could fix. I had held out hope, even after everything I'd seen, that maybe there was a way to work through it. Maybe we could get back to what we used to be. But now I realized there was no going back. Amanda didn't love me anymore. And worse, She didn't even seem to care that she was tearing me apart. "You could have just told me you weren't happy," I said, my voice barely holding together. "We could have worked on it. We could have tried to fix things." She shook her head, like I didn't understand. "I didn't want to fix things, Jake. That's the point. I want something else. Something new." Her words were like a final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I stood there, unable to speak, unable to think. All the emotions I had been holding back came crashing down on me. Anger, sadness, betrayal. But more than anything, I just felt empty. "Is this really it, Amanda?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Are you really willing to throw everything away for this?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, like she was deciding whether or not to give me the truth. And then she shrugged. "Yeah, I guess I am." That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done. There was no saving this, no coming back from it. Amanda had made her choice, and it wasn't me. It was never going to be me. I felt a wave of emotion hit me so hard I almost couldn't stand. I had loved this woman for 8 years. I had built my life around her, trusted her, shared everything with her. And now, in the space of a few cold, careless sentences, she had torn it all apart. I felt like I was watching my whole life fall apart right in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I didn't know what else to say. I didn't have the energy to keep fighting, to keep begging for answers that didn't matter anymore. So I just turned around and walked away. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her anymore. That night, I slept in the guest room, or at least I tried to. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wrap my head around it. How had we gone from being happy, from planning a future together, to this? How had I missed the signs? And why didn't she care? The next morning, when I woke up, I found Amanda sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. There was no going back. Not after what she had said. Not after the way she had treated me like I didn't matter. The following morning, I sat across from Amanda at the kitchen table, the tension thick between us. She was sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone like everything was normal, like she hadn't just shattered our entire marriage the night before. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. I wanted to ask her what came next. Was she planning on moving in with Liam? Was she just waiting for me to leave? But I didn't have the energy for another confrontation. What was the point? I already knew the answer. She was done with me, and I wasn't sure if I had it in me to fight for someone who clearly didn't care anymore. For a few days, we existed in this weird, uncomfortable limbo. I continued to sleep in the guest room, and we barely spoke. When we did, it was surface level, like we were roommates who'd barely known each other. I spent most of my time at work, coming home late, hoping that by the time I got back, she'd be asleep. It was a strange mix of anger and numbness. On one hand, I was furious at Amanda for what she'd done, for how she treated me like I was nothing. But on the other hand, I felt this deep sense of sadness, this unbearable weight of loss. I kept thinking about all the years we had spent together, all the moments we'd shared. How had it come to this? Every time I walked past the living room, I saw her on her phone, texting someone, probably Liam. That's what hurt the most. She was still seeing him, and she didn't even bother hiding it anymore. It was like I wasn't even part of her life. I started thinking about how long she had been checked out, and I realized she probably hadn't loved me for a long time. Maybe months, maybe years. That thought hit me like a punch in the gut. One evening, I came home late again, hoping to avoid any interaction, but Amanda was waiting for me in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, like she had been waiting to talk. The sight of her sitting there, calm and composed, made my stomach twist. "We need to figure this out, Jake," she said, her voice calm but cold. "This can't go on like this. We both know it. She wasn't wrong. The silence, the tension, it was suffocating. We were living in the same house, but it felt like we were miles apart. I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of everything pressed down on me. "Yeah, I know," I muttered, not even sure what to say. "What do you want to do?" She looked at me like she had already made up her mind. "I think we should separate. It's not working, and I don't want to drag this out." "Neither of us does." The words felt like a slap, even though I'd seen them coming. I guess I had been holding onto some sliver of hope that she might want to fix things, that maybe there was a way to make it work. But hearing her say it out loud, that we should separate, made it all real. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, if that's what you want, there's no point in arguing. No point in trying to convince her to stay. She had already made her choice." "It is," she said, without a trace of emotion. "I've already started looking for a place. I'll move out in a week." A week. That's how long I had to wrap my head around the fact that our marriage was officially over. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. How did we go from planning a future together to this? To sitting at the kitchen table, calmly discussing our separation like it was some casual decision? I didn't ask her where she was going. I didn't want to know if it had anything to do with Liam. Honestly, I didn't want to know anything about her plans. At that point, it was like Amanda wasn't even Amanda anymore. She was someone I used to know, someone I had loved, but that person was long gone. The next few days were a blur. We started dividing up our things, talking about who would take what we'd do with the house. I tried to keep it together, to act like I was okay with all of it, but every time I packed something up, it felt like I was packing up a piece of our life together. Amanda acted like it was just another task, like she was cleaning out the garage or something. There was no emotion in her, no sadness, no regret. It was like she was already gone, and I was just cleaning up the mess she left behind. One night, as I was packing up some of my things, I came across an old photo album. It was from our first few years together. Pictures of our college days, vacations we'd taken, moments that felt so full of love and happiness. I sat there flipping through the pages, and for the first time in weeks, I broke down. I couldn't stop the tears from coming. I cried for everything we had lost, for the future we would never have. I cried because the woman I had loved for so long was gone, and there was nothing I could do to bring her back. That night, I realized that it was over, really over, and no amount of anger or sadness could change that. Amanda had moved on, and now I had to find a way to move on too. The week passed faster than I expected. Amanda moved through the house like a ghost, barely interacting with me except for the necessary logistics, dividing up the furniture, deciding who'd take the car, and how we'd handle the mortgage. She was packing up her things as if she was just moving out for a weekend, not leaving behind 8 years of marriage. It was strange, surreal, like the past didn't exist for her anymore. For me, though, every step felt heavy. Every box I packed carried not just clothes or kitchen supplies, but the weight of all our memories. I kept catching myself thinking, what if? What if I had noticed the signs earlier? What if I had done something differently? But deep down, I knew none of that mattered. Amanda was already gone. She had been gone for a long time. The day she left, it was almost anticlimactic. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no final arguments or tearful apologies. Amanda stood by the door, her bags packed, her car running in the driveway. She gave me a nod, almost like a coworker leaving the office. "Well, I guess this is it," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. I nodded back, not trusting myself to say much. "Yeah, I guess it is." For a moment, there was silence. I thought maybe she'd say something more, an apology, an acknowledgement of what we had once shared. But there was nothing. Instead, she gave me a half-smile, the kind you give a stranger when you don't know what else to do. "Take care, Jake," she said, as if we hadn't just spent nearly a decade building a life together. I swallowed hard. forcing myself to keep it together. You too, Amanda. And then she was gone, just like that. I watched her drive away, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry or heartbroken. I just felt empty. The house felt bigger, quieter. I stood there for a long time after she left, just staring at the spot where her car had been. It was over. Really over. In the days that followed, I kept waiting for the wave of emotion to hit me, but it didn't. Instead, there was this strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I wasn't constantly checking her location anymore, or wondering if she was lying to me. I wasn't second-guessing every word she said. The chaos of the past few months was finally gone, and while the sadness was still there, it was quieter now, more manageable. It took a while, but I started to find peace with it. I realized that the person Amanda had become wasn't someone I could have stayed married to, no matter how hard I tried. The woman I loved was gone, and holding on to the idea of her was only hurting me. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work, and even started going to the gym again. Not for anyone else, but for me. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but little by little, I started to feel more like myself again. Like the version of me before all the lies, before all the betrayal. Every now and then, I'd get a message from Amanda about some leftover bill or paperwork, but the conversations were brief and transactional. We were strangers now, and that was okay. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need to know why she chose someone else or what she was doing with her life. I was moving on. Looking back, I've learned a lot from this experience. More than anything, I've learned that you can't control what someone else does, no matter how much you love them. You can't make them stay, and you can't make them care. All you can do is take care of yourself and let go when it's time to let go. So, to anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs. And if it comes down to it, don't be afraid to walk away. I stayed longer than I should have, hoping things would change, but sometimes people don't. And that's okay. You'll get through it. It won't be easy, and it'll hurt like hell. But eventually, you'll come out the other side. You'll find yourself again, and you'll realize that you're stronger than you ever thought you could be. And that's something no one can take away from you. As for Amanda, I hope she finds whatever it is she was looking for. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just ready to move forward, and that's it. It's over now, and I'm finally okay with that. Thanks to everyone who's been reading and offering support. It means more than you know. Take care, everyone.